we go. Okay, good evening, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. My name is Richard Stewart, Mayor, and I want to welcome everybody on behalf of Council who's come out here, all our citizens, any former mayors in the audience, anybody in the audience. So welcome all. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 1 is the minute. Sorry, allowed. Item 1 is the minutes of the public hearing held Monday, March 18th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor Sikora. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, March 18th. The recommendation to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is the minutes of the Tri-Cities Homelessness and Housing Task Group meeting held on Friday, January 4th. Recommendation that these minutes be received.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is the minutes of the Tri-Cities Homelessness and Housing Task Group meeting held on Friday, February 1st. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Sikora. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the minutes of the Joint Family Court and Youth Justice Committee meeting held on Wednesday, February 27th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is the minutes of the Strategic Priority Standing Committee meeting held on Wednesday, March 13th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
So moved.
Moved by everybody. Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is the minutes of the Sports Council meeting held on Wednesday, March 13th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Rasmussen. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the BC Summer Games and Senior Games. The recommendations that the City of Coquitlam submit a bid to host the 2016 BC Senior Games.
If I could ask Council, if someone is contemplating moving a recommendation like that, that the recommendation, or rather the motion could be closer to that we ask staff to report back on measures necessary to submit a bid to host the 2016. Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Rasmussen. All in favour? Oops, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm assuming that the wording you suggested is the wording that we're voting on. In other words, we're asking for a report.
That is the motion.
I'd like that. Could that report include some reference to the process? Who will be responsible for the bid? Will we put together a community committee as we have in the past for occasions like this? I don't need an answer to that question. I just need it to be dealt with in the report. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none. The motion is a staff report on a potential bid. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously. I have similar wording for the next one.
Item 8 is the minutes of the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, March 14th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Nope. Councillor Nicholson. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously. The other Neil.
Recommendation arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the Evergreen Line Public Art and Beautification Program. The committee's recommendation is that Council establish a Coquitlam Evergreen Line Public Art Project Committee, and 2, that staff be directed to prepare terms of reference for the committee in consultation with the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee and report back as soon as possible.
On this one, I would hope that Council may wish to propose a motion such as worded in number 2, that we ask staff to prepare a report on the aesthetics and public art aspects of the Evergreen Line, potentially with terms and references of a committee in consultation with the Art and Cultural Advisory Committee, and report back as soon as possible. Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor Sikora. Any discussion? All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Moving on to reports of staff. Item 9 concerns the authorization for the issuance of a development permit. This is at 25 and 31 Fawcett Road. Recommendation from staff is that Council approve the signing and sealing of this DP and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I know it's an engineering company applying for this, but just through to the fire chief, is there anything, because it's gas, is there anything special that we have to be worried about as a city? Sorry, Chief, it's item 9.
Yeah, I have that in front of us. We would have the opportunity to
make submissions in a meeting with the planning division. So
Okay,
at
but
that
there's
time,
nothing we need to do from here. That's.
nothing has been raised at this point. No.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this is a CNG conversion, or a plant with a CNG conversion. No, no. Gasoline is more scary than natural gas. At least to me, anyway. Any other discussion on this item? Motion's on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Cook some hot dogs.
Cooking hot dogs. Yes, Councillor Sikora. Speaking of hot dogs, Councillor Sikora has a suggestion.
Item 10 concerns a proposed lane cancellation application. This is south of 1900 block Dawes Hill Road. This is bylaw number 4380. Staff recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to Safe Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation bylaw number 4380, and 2, that this bylaw be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the community charter.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Asmussen. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I just have a question about, when you have a cancellation like this and not everyone participates. So we have these two, what looks like, I'm assuming duplex, side by side, attached, 1975, 1977. And so they are not going to be purchasing the land. Does that mean they do not get to use it if they wanted to put a bench out there or a garden? I'm just trying to think about equity here.
Your Worship, I'd asked about that myself when I was reviewing the report, and I think if you turn to Attachment 3, it's the last page in the plans there, and you're correct. 3 out of the 4, or 8 of those properties did come to an agreement. The one lot, lot 16 on Peterson, for whatever reason, the property owner was not interested in participating, and so they've declined the opportunity to buy their half, so to speak, of the closed lane. So in that instance there, you see lot 21 coming down from Dawes Hill. That actually, the rear lot line will extend back further, so they're getting their half.
Plus the others. Okay, so they're buying the whole. They're buying the whole lane.
So what it does, in the end, it results in a little bit of an irregularity. If you look at that Attachment 3, you see a bit of a jog. That's the way it's been sorted out.
Okay, so the entire thing is canceled because the neighbors behind are purchasing the whole side. That's helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
1976, we'll have the whole lane.
We'll have the whole. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. So 8 halves of the 10 halves are being purchased, but not uniformly. Councillor Hodge.
Okay, so that answers part of my question, because I was trying to figure out what was going to happen between the two, and so one is just buying both halves, and so they're going to have a deeper lot, so that totally makes sense. My question is, and I'm just referring, I guess it's lot 1920 or 1957 on Peterson, and on the map I'm looking at, it's lot 23. Did they just both decline to participate? Is that, or the lane we still got a partial lane coming in, or what's happening off of McKinnon?
These are the ones off McKinnon.
Coming in off McKinnon. And so we now have a lane that goes in the length of one house. Is that because neither of those two residents opted to buy, or was it not an option that was presented to them?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I have to admit, I haven't been out on the site myself. Been by Dawes Hill Road many times, but the way it was described to me is there actually physically a lane there, a rough lane, and there's access being taken off that. So for that reason, it was not the opportunity to close that was not pursued.
Okay, so I didn't have that. I have that picture. So that lane is actually okay. It's not clear here. So I guess that first house is actually using that as their entry point. So that's why they still want to have the lane and the others aren't. Okay, good, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Report from Councillor Sikora.
No, thank you. Councillor Craig Hodge had asked the question that I was going to ask.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is the authorization for the issuance of a development variance permit. This is for 570 Poirier Street, and in particular Centennial Secondary School. Prior to putting forward the staff recommendation, I would ask the chair to call for speakers.
We We hold a mini public hearing in the event of a development variance permit, and so that's an opportunity to hear from the public. Are there any people present who wish to speak? Please step forward. The rules of our public hearing normally apply, so we'll ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes. You can speak more than once.
Yeah, no problem. I'll be.
And you state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and fellow councillors. My name is Kieran O'Sullivan. I live at 553 Berry Street. I've been there for 28 years, and I plan on moving out 10 toes up, depending on your decision tonight, of course. Anyway, the great difference when I look out my back door is 3 meters already with the existing football field. So they're asking for 16.09 meters. So that would make a difference. That would make it 19 meters, not 16 meters. And where I'm right in the middle. So I'll be looking at the library and I'll be looking at the auditorium. So it'll affect me most, I figure anyway.
Just for our reference, how many houses between you and King Albert? How many houses?
There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's actually 4. There's 2 in the corner there.
Okay. So
and the grade goes up as we go south.
Yep.
So I feel property values will be affected. Privacy, more than property values, I'm worried about. And also, I guess everybody's got a copy of the petition that we signed and submitted. And I'd just like quickly to go over the city manager's, the general manager's planning and development letter, page 2. The reason that the staff supports the variance. I'd just like to go over those points. The first point, they're talking about the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Well, I don't think that has anything to do with the variance. I don't know why they're using that here. The second point, 2-story building. Well, we're talking 52 feet. This a 2-story building would be 20 feet. So I don't know how they get that. Most of the proposed school is below the zoning bylaw of 11 meters. Well, that's great. We don't care about that. That's within the bylaw. The next point is the highest part of the school. It's 55 meters away from the property. Well, that's why we're here, is because we're opposed to the height of that. And the last point about the trees, what about noise and privacy and litter that I'm worried about, and are the trees going to be 60 feet high? So basically that's all I have to say, and I just hope that you'll see it our way and give us a positive vote on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got some questions here, and some of them may be for you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you. I've gotten the report and I've received the email on some of the concerns about the height. And it's, I guess my question is through to Mr. McIntyre in the planning department. Looking at the replacement of the school and the difficulties, I know there's been, is there any way, you know, of bringing down the height a bit, or is this about as far down as it will go depending on how they want to get in to the ground, is for the school building itself?
Yeah.
I'm asking Mr. McIntyre, the general manager.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, I can provide some general observations and comments. We have asked the school district's consultant, the applicant, the architect on this particular application to come prepared tonight to speak to the proposal, and so they can probably get into more of the design details than I can. But as the gentleman's indicated, we set out in the report here some of the factors we think that need to be taken into consideration when looking at the proposal. With the gas line right-of-way through there, it does bisect the site at an odd angle. And if the desire is to, and certainly that's the imperative, is to keep the existing school operational while it's being replaced, it only leaves them with one half of the lot to build on. And I think actually going back a few years ago, the school district was looking at other siting options, but in the end, there was a little bit of a backlash to that in the community as well, so the site was chosen here. There is a natural drop in the site from the northeast corner to the southwest corner, so unfortunately it's something they have to contend with. So if you're looking from west to east, the ground rises, so it makes for the building size to appear larger. The architect can speak more to how specifically in their design, the reason why that portion of the building exceeds the 11 meter, is proposed to exceed the 11 meter building height maximum. As we've noted, much of the building it does not meet that or anywhere near that. So they've tried to use the natural fall in the site, and they've extended the building sort of laterally or longitudinally along the gas pipeline right-of-way. Portions of the structure, because it is the nature of the building, I believe, there's a theater, there's a library, it's added to the building height in those areas. But again, I'd let the applicant's architect speak to that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, there's other questions, so you might be back. But anyway, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Mine was to do with the parking. Someone else sent us a letter with respect to the parking, worried about that there might not be enough parking because they were using the school board office parking and including it in the student parking. Is that correct?
Your Worship, I saw that email today as well, and I asked the file manager on the application to look into that and provide me some information, some details on the parking. And what the school facility would require overall is 179 spaces. What is being provided is 192 spaces. Now, some of the spaces for the secondary school would be within the area of the parking lot around the existing board administration offices.
How many?
In that area there, well, actually, it's the board offices by the bylaw would require 41 spaces, which they provide. The neighborhood learning center, which is the other part of the project that's on the east side of the right-of-way, that is estimated to require 38 spaces. So that's 79. And with the reconfigured parking layout around the existing board office, there would be 73 spaces in there. So they would be short 6, and those 6 would then be made up with within the parking lot up on the north side of the site across from Winslow, and there'd be 192 spaces in there. So in the end, they have 7 extra parking spaces over and above what's required in the bylaw.
So we're over. Yahoo. Okay. Now, the other thing in this letter, and I think this is something that we should be thinking of rectifying, it's about the emergency generator and garbage bins and things like that that could be quite an annoyance to the neighbors, and I think it appears in several emails we've got, and I think that's pretty logical to relocate them or to do something so that they're not a nuisance to the property owners, the smell and the noise and the hums and all that stuff all night.
Yeah. Your Worship, if I could, perhaps I can put this site plan up on the overhead projector. On the site plan, I asked staff to highlight those 2 features: the emergency generator. Let's put it up there. Yeah. The emergency generator and the garbage storage area. So you'll see these on this now. Okay. Just bear with me here. You see this is 192 spaces circled in red.
Yeah.
Just go a little bit to the left of that, and you'll see that would be the west property line of the site. Mm-hmm. There's a little highlighted strip through there. That's the garbage receptacle storage area. Now, if you come down further along that west boundary, you see some of the trees that are marked there with the dots. You'll see in behind the school on the west side, again highlighted, is the enclosure for emergency power generation, and that's that little box, if you will, there.
How much noise does it emit?
It would be a very, very occasional. It's for emergency operation. Typically, they're usually a diesel pack or two for electrical generator. Perhaps the architect might be able to speak to that. If it's in some sort of enclosure, there could be pretty decent noise attenuation with that. I don't have the immediate other information at hand.
Okay. And so there's neighbors right behind the garbage bins.
That could be an area where there is the need for additional fencing and landscaping to better screen and buffer that interface there.
And the smell and the odor, that's the problem, especially with a ton of teenagers, of which I had in my house at one time.
Yeah. Your Worship, very good points, and perhaps this is something that could be asked of the applicant's architect, and they may have looked at alternate locations for that part of the facility.
Perfect, thank you. You've covered all the emails now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. To Mr. McIntyre, the Centennial School at the present time has got 192 spaces, parking spaces.
What would be required with the reconstruction is 179.
I know, but I'm asking, it is not going to be any smaller. Centennial School is not going to be any smaller to what it is today.
Yeah.
Is it?
Your Worship, I'm sorry, I don't know what they've got right now on site for parking and how that compares the numbers. We're looking at the site plan, and what they've demonstrated to us is that with the reconstruction for the new secondary school, the neighborhood learning center, and the board office remaining in its current location, they'll have more than enough parking stalls as per our bylaw.
That's right, and the bylaw has been changed lately to, no, it hasn't. Okay, thank you. That's what I'm just a little touchy with.
The development variance permit that's before us has nothing to do with
parking. That's on height.
parking.
That had nothing to do with parking spaces.
Okay,
like
that's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, and so it's on height. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify that there is no variance in the parking. Parking is not part of this development permit. But I believe, did we not just recently pass a new bylaw that said for new schools the amount of parking had been lowered? So this is not, in fact, what it would have been. So there would be, it's maybe what's required, but what is required today is less than what was required about 14 months ago. Is that correct?
Your Worship, good catch. That's right. We did amend our zoning bylaw last year, taking into account differing driving trends with students now, particularly with the graduated licensing program. There's fewer students.
But also a recognition that high school used to be 11 and 12, both driving years, and now it's 9, 10, 11, and 12, which half of which don't drive. So.
Yeah. But it isn't a parking variance that's being requested. But Councillor Hodge is correct. It meets, and in fact exceeds the current parking standard that has been revised.
And I'm fine with that. In that I did a drive by the school one day and thought it was a Pro D day. So the days when I went to Centennial and we were parking over at the sports center is over. So I'm okay with that. But when I look at this design and layout, and from a school standpoint, it certainly makes sense to put the generator behind the school and the garbage out back. But in this case, out back of a school is actually the back of a residential neighborhood. And so I would really like to hear what options we are to create buffers there. And as I said, I think it makes sense to have your trash on your back door, except the back door here is on somebody else's back of their home. And so I'm really concerned. I'm not so much concerned with the generator because I think that's an on-off. It's going to happen when there's a power failure, and if that's the only intent. But the garbage bins being positioned there, and I know you want access for trucks coming in, but I'm really sort of concerned about that, and I'd like to hear more on that one. The other thing is, and I may have missed it, but I was a little confused on the height, where I believe we said it's a 2-story, but these are not standard stories. These are bigger than 2, so the 2 stories is a little misleading. It's not really a 2-story building like it's there today. When I think of the wing that goes down along by the shops, that was to me as a 2-story. So this is maybe a story on top of like a gymnasium. It's high, so it is higher than what was there. And the other question I had in this, and I think it was raised in either in an email or in here, is the location of the shops with the is that in around the back? I'm just trying to look at this here. Yeah.
Your Worship, my understanding is that the shops are at the north end of the site. So you come in off of Winslow and come down that drive. There's the building sort of jogs at that northwest corner. I believe that's the doors into the shop area there.
And I guess my last question is I recall, I haven't been down to the site lately, but there was, I think it references here, the row of trees. I remember there was that long sort of row of trees down by the lower field. And I remember when this originally came up for some discussion way back, they said the trees would be left there, they'd be protected. And I'm just wondering the height of the trees in relationship to the building that's proposed. This building would be taller than those trees, even though I think the trees have been there probably since about 1967, but this would still be higher than what those trees are?
To the Chair, it is correct. The existing trees are to be retained. There will be some additional trees planted in there to help enhance that buffering. The relative heights, I think, will become clear. We've asked the architect to prepare a cross-section showing the proposed building heights of the school, the grade on the school site relative to this gentleman and his neighbors' houses, and perhaps on that it'll show the tree heights as well, so they can get a sense of that.
It doesn't show on the cross-section here. It shows the buildings, but I don't see anything with just from a perspective standpoint, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. O'Sullivan is standing here patiently, and I do have questions for you based on the petition that bears your name and names of several dozen other people. It's stated in your second paragraph that this building will reduce light access, privacy, and restrict views from all of your properties. And is that an educated guess? Have you? I just want to know how you can know that. Maybe you're fearful that it is, and I can understand that. But I don't know.
Well,
if you
I haven't looked at the plans and for the 16.09 meters. And if that's at the north end, it's very close to the properties up there, so it could affect light.
No, the 16 point, the highest point, I think. Where is it? It's going to be sort of, my reading, going to be sort of in the middle of the building, isn't it? And on the east side of the building.
Yeah, I didn't know that when I wrote the letter. That's my point.
I'm going to suggest he may want to come back up. Why don't we hear from the architect?
Sure, okay. And then, okay, so you can sit down. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And,
Thanks so much. There were no more questions for you yet.
Okay.
There may be some afterwards, and I thank you so much for coming.
you. Okay.
And I'm going to, because my comments were that, I believe that the highest point, first of all, and this, I know, don't take that, oh, you took it away. Okay.
I believe the architect's going to bring a bigger, fancier one.
Bigger, fancier. I just wanted to show, but the drawing that was there, if you look at the lot in the bottom right corner, bottom left corner, that's probably the previous speaker's property down in that direction. And at that point, the building is moving away from the residential. Its lowest elevation, its lowest height is at the top corner where it's closest to the residential. So I suspect I'm going to ask the architect to what extent. I don't even think the residential will be able to see the highest point because it's actually on the far side of the building at that point, at the north or the west.
I'm still in the middle of sort of these exact same questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't. Yeah, because I was going to point out, and the architects come here, and I can ask them as well because it was sort of.
Okay.
So thank you, and maybe you should identify yourselves.
Is the microphone here?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Ron Hofford, and I'm the project architect for the project. And Alfredo Verdicchio from Facilities School District 43 is here as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Is the highest, the point of the building that you need the most variance, is that the top of the theater that's in the middle of the building? and on the east side of the building? Is that?
That is correct.
Okay, so
Yeah.
and then on the other side of that middle thick point of the building is the library, and that's on the west side of the building. Yes. So basically, we're seeing 179 spaces required on the map there. That's actually the library, and it's so it's no variance there. So the variance is for the east side of the building, closest to where it says 179 spaces required. Although that's nothing to do with the building. Is that right? That's where the variance is for, primarily.
I think that was just a note that.
Yeah, you don't need to explain the 179. I'm just trying to locate it for everybody here. That across from 100, so you move your finger upwards and to the right there. Yeah, there's underneath there's the theater, and that's the high point of the building, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now,
I have further cross sections.
Yes. Okay. Now, did you in the design of the building consider the impact of potential reduced light coming onto the buildings on the houses on Barry Street, or restricted views on the houses on Barry Street? Did that factor into your planning here? Do you think that will have any major impact, or even a minor impact? Was it, or any shadow studies done, anything like that, or did you think they were even needed?
We did shadow studies, and the shadows are virtually clear, all fall on the property line or don't affect any of the existing houses, so it's not a factor.
The shadows, yeah, you better hold the microphone up. That's an important statement that these people need to hear.
That the shadows fall either on their property or nowhere near anyone's house. This portion of the building is not that high out of the ground, so the shadows, in fact, aren't very far. The biggest shadows would be cast here, and they fall certainly within the boundaries of the site.
Now, there's quite a few trees along that border right now, correct, on the west side of the property. Do those have the effect of impacting the views from those properties now? And would the building, if they do, does the building, would it impact the views from those Barry Street properties any more or any less?
It would, right now, from about the middle of the site northward, it's very dense planting, probably dating back to the 60s. I'd say those trees are 15 to 20 meters high. There's less dense planting on the southern portion. In the public information meeting that we had, we committed to increasing the planting along the south property line virtually to match, not necessarily in a hedgerow, but in a creative planting way, to match the screening effect of that on the north. In addition...
Now, before we go any further on that, and those plans were presented in at least one open house, I believe, at yes. Centennial. I attended that. Were there any expressions of opposition to the planting of those trees and the potential adverse impact on views from Barry Street?
The impression that we had was that they were desired.
Okay, desired.
For sound and visual.
Okay, so they weren't concerned about losing views.
Didn't come up, to my knowledge.
Okay. No. You can continue. You've had more. I cut you off, and you were just going to talk about it a little more, but that's fine.
That's fine.
Okay.
I don't want to use up a lot of time, but some of the questions can be answered with a very brief kind of overview of the project.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll try to be brief. Here we have an aerial photograph. As the Director of Planning indicated, we did do an initial study to try and relocate the site to the Winslow, and public consultations both in that neighborhood and this one seem to favor to a ratio of 9-to-1 to keep the location here on Poirier, partly for take advantage of the amenities that are there and the historical kind of context of it. It's been there for about 40 years. This project started in 2004, and it really started off life as a seismic review, and it was found at that time that the existing school is a high seismic risk, And then additional studies from then till about 2008 indicated that replacing the school would be more cost-effective, less expensive, literally, to try to seismically upgrade the existing building. So that, coupled with the not going forward with the Winslow option and creating a new school, leaves us, as the Director of Planning mentioned, not very much site to put the building on to maintain an existing school. The existing school population is about 1,500 right now, and the design population for the new school is about 1,200, so it is going to go down a little bit in size. It's projected to be operating in September 2015. So our design approach was to try to stretch it out here and hug the oil line to keep the building as close to the existing building as we could, and quite obviously away from the west property line. We had other siting options that came off King Albert, and those were rejected because of the sensitivity to the King Albert neighborhood and also to the backyards of the western neighborhood as well. So what you see here is essentially what we call a single-story building to the oil line side, and a two-story arrangement on the south side, on the downhill side of the slope. It's basically just give you a quick cross-section here. This might explain it better. This is a typical kind of cross-section. You can see we've got essentially one story here. This is the height of the theater beyond, but basically the rest of the building on the north side, on the uphill side, is one story, and we have two stories on the downhill side. In the middle, highlighted here, is a two-story atrium, and we do have clerestory glass projections to allow light into this atrium so that this does not seem like a dark basement. The calculation of height in the bylaw, the calculation of height is taken from the lowest corner, the lowest portion of the site. Not the average, not the height against the building, the lowest. And that portion, that is right here. And so that cross-section shows here. Here we have the height at the oil line, and here we have the height of the bottom level, and here we have the finished grade at that library point. So the library at that point, following the grade, goes down another 1.8 meters, and from that low point to here is 6 meters. Now when you take that point and you apply it to other cross sections, for example the one I just had, you can see here is where that library point corresponds here. And so the 11 meters are measured from that. You can see that it just goes over the height of the two-story portion here, and it just sort of cuts off a little bit of the parapet here on the high side. When you take that cross-section on the northern portion of the site, the tech ed portion up here, this section is right here. You can see here is where the height is measured from, way down here. This is the corresponding point. So 11 meters comes here, and that line runs across. This is the low portion. It's a classroom type, and here we have the metalwork and automotive and so forth, which are located on the north portion of the site. So I think the way height is calculated kind of overstates how severe the relaxation is that we're requesting.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the Director of Planning asked if we would do some cross-sections through the site indicating the residential properties, and so we've done that here. This would be section A here. These are the cross-sections that were suggested to us, and so we've reproduced those. So here's A, We've got the single-family house over here. We've drawn a blue line to show the view that one would have. The property line is here. These trees aren't to scale, but they would be located in that location. And this is the highest portion that this particular house would see. This is the highest portion on the south side. That is the library. The highest portion on the north side here, which is the theater, very likely would not be visible from the west side. I've got two other sections. This section C here is the middle one. And so you can see the single-family house here, the property line, and this is the technology section here and going across. And then the last one, section D, which is across here, cuts through the highest portion. And here's the corresponding single-family house. Sorry, move that up. On the way. A little bit long. There we are. There's the corresponding house, the property line, the trees. Oh, sorry, it's this one here. The property line, the single-family house, the property line, the trees.
It was D. You were right.
Oh, was the right one?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I got ahead of myself here. Yeah, the long one here.
Mm-hmm.
The single-family house, the property line, the tree, and then this, the highest portion, which is the library. The library is quite a bit larger than a normal high school library. I have to admit that. It is a major feature of the school, and we think that it'll be quite an asset. The last one here, we were asked if we could do some kind of computer modeling showing what one might see if one was at the top one. To see if I can position those on the site. The top one would be very near the pathway, looking this way, maybe a little bit south, looking this way. And the bottom one would be down here, looking this way. So you can see the library is about just a little bit south of the pathway here. And I'm sorry, that one's a little bit south of the pathway. So you're looking back at the library, and this one here is kind of face on. This bottom section here shows sort of one last cross section, which kind of puts this in context a little bit for us, and it sort of goes straight across here, over here, and comes through the building on the other side, which is the Neighborhood Learning Center. And then this red bit here, I don't know if you can see it, this line right here is the height of the existing school, which is just over 13 meters. So all things considered, we are lower than the existing school by a strange calculation. If you take a quick Cook's tour around, this is definitely the highest point. We're at 12.8 meters. Here, adjacent to it, 8.9 meters. Right at this corner, we're only 6.9 meters. Here, 7.1. At this particular point, 5.8. And at the theater, which would be 10.050, 10 meters roughly. The admin area, 6.8. Home ec would be 5.6. And then the art area here is out of the ground 2 inches over 11 meters. Some of the other questions that have come up with regard to the generator, which is here. We've dug the generator into the hill. This would be an emergency generator only. It's intended, if that generator's on, it doesn't mean there's business as usual. It will only be for emergency lighting, for the refrigeration of specimens in the science, and for food. The maximum capacity of the fuel is 10 hours, but it isn't expected that this would be, that the school would run. It can't run with that emergency generators. It's basically get people out. If the gyms were used in a true emergency situation, because oftentimes public do show up where there is gyms, that generator could power the gyms, but they would need to refill the tank twice a day. So it would be a very extraordinary circumstance. This, the noise from this, the noise from any equipment on the automotive, the carpentry shop here, any rooftop equipment, is to be monitored by an acoustical consultant that the school district has retained. And our objective is to try to keep the noise at the property line within the ambient levels. So there isn't a specific decibel or bylaw about that, but ambient levels would be reasonable, I think. With regard to the garbage here, it is about 10 meters away from the property line, and then usually the siting for a house is another 7.5, so it would be in the order of 17 meters plus away from a house. Smells and rodents are not desirable for the high school either, and so all of their organic garbage is bagged before it goes in, and all of the bins are lockable, and the number of bins, of course, increases and changes as recycling programs are developed. Oh yes, one last thing with regard to parking. One of the questions that we had was construction phase parking, constructors, workers parking, and parking during construction. And this here is phase one that maps out the hoarding for the contractors area, and we're suggesting that this area here would be for contractors parking and or this area up here. There is temporary parking to be provided on the Vanier site across the street here. This will address students, the school board, and some overflow if there's additional parking required. And not part of the calculation, but for convenience, the school district and the city are entering into an agreement to lease some of the dogwood parking for teachers and just basically the convenience factor. But it's not in the required calculation. As the phasing continues, you can see more parking. You know, during the demolition phase, it's probably basically the same. But then once the demolition is done and construction begins on the neighborhood learning center, this frees up other areas on the site for parking as well. So I think I promised I'd be brief. I hopefully haven't tried your patience. Currently, the project is in for building permit. We have a window of opportunity right now to put it out for tender. Bids right now are very competitive. We'd like to get it out within the next month. And all of the documentation is in at the ministry, so there's a window of opportunity to get that approved, and that desire is to have that before, shall we say, May. The significance of May.
Something happening in May?
I have no further questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship.
The next few questions, I believe, are for you. So,
in staring carefully at the emergency generator, I noticed the property immediately behind it appears very narrow, and I'm looking at one of the many maps that we have, one of the pictorials. It looks as though that may be an alleyway or a walkway or something. It's not, doesn't look big enough to build a house on?
Oh, no, that's a public right-of-way. That's vehicular access to the house. I don't know if it comes up here.
Yes.
not really.
I have it on the one
here.
I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's not very visible.
And does
here.
it also ultimately then provide access to the school site?
It does, yeah. Right now, that's a pathway that we've connected into the pathway system. Kids use it now. It's a worn path. As I say, it's a public right-of-way. If we didn't put a path there, then I'm sure the kids would go anyway.
Would walk there anyway, that's right. Okay, does it also offer some ability to service that emergency generator? Or?
Yes, it would be used for delivery of fuel. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Number one, you mentioned a larger library. Now, I remember in the 70s, that used to be a public library to all the people in Coquitlam. And now it's mainly we got our own library, so with the new technologies nowadays with discs and everything else, why would you need a larger library?
In 21st century learning, it's not about the books. The library has evolved substantially beyond books. In fact, you're quite right that the collection is shrinking. I think the current collection is about 25,000 books, and that would be dropping to 16,000. But the library is used for research, developing critical thinking, for collaborative kind of work. Various teachers bring groups in there for focused kind of work. The teacher librarian works with them. And a big part of this is called the Learning Commons. And that idea is to have a focused area where kids can meet together, not be dead quiet, but work together in a collaborative way to develop projects together. They can meet with their teachers or the teacher librarian. And so if you look at the floor plan for the library, it's really a lot more than books. The stacks is sort of like...
Okay, so would I be correct if I'd say that if you didn't want a larger library, you didn't have to have the height variance, or you still would?
If we had a smaller library, I suppose the footprint would not extend out as far.
So you would
because what's happening as we extend this way,
yes,
it goes down the slope, and then the height gets worse and worse because you're measuring from a lower and lower point.
And I'm concerned with the garbage bins and the generator. The garbage bins are next to a residential area, and I can tell you something. I've had many calls on, where they have a commercial pickup for the garbage, and the garbage trucks come around at 6 o'clock in the morning when the bylaw says 7. They'll come at 6 o'clock in the morning, wake up the neighborhood. Next thing you know, I'm getting a call. So I'm really, really concerned that there's a different place to put the garbage bins and also the generator. I'll know it's an emergency generator, but you never know when it comes on.
It's an emergency one.
Yeah, it's an emergency one. I realize that. But emergency generators, that's what they're there for in emergencies. And if there's an emergency at 11 o'clock at night or midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, they come on.
Okay.
Am I correct?
I think you're correct, yes.
Thank you very much.
If it's an emergency, it would come on, right? That's...
Okay, I had a couple of questions. You said ambient, and
yes.
So could you explain, there may be some misunderstandings, how much would someone in a neighboring property hear the generator if you're able to achieve ambient?
The ambient noise varies throughout the day.
Yep.
So if you were to go outside the school or outside the building, the traffic noise and whatever noise is in the community sort of gives a background noise. That's ambient noise. Mm. So that usually is around 65, between 65 and 70 decibels. So that is the level that we would be aiming for at the property line.
So in other words,
beyond the generator mufflers, as I say, it's in a dug into the hill in a concrete kind of recess, and it would have modern generators aren't as noisy as they used to be.
So these are the same kinds of generators we use at festivals and sort of things. They don't drown out everything. And in this case, a generator that wouldn't be able to be heard, you wouldn't notice it came on because of the ambient noise, depending on, of course, the number of variables, wind. And
they need to be fired up once a month for maintenance, and it'd be completely insensitive to fire them up at 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning. So they would need to be fired up when the ambient level of noise is up. So say 3 o'clock on a weekday afternoon would probably be a good time to fire it up. for whatever period of time it needs.
Okay. Not that we're here to talk about the generators at all, because this is a height variance. On the height issue, can you, and I guess part of this is because of the way we describe building height in our bylaw, can you tell me, can you put up again the map of the height above adjacent grade? You had 7 or 8 points. Which ones of these are variances?
Well, the way the...
If you were calculating against adjacent grade, for example.
Well, everything shown in red exceeds the 11 meters, measured from that low point.
No, from the low, not from the low point, but from the adjacent grade. I mean, these people don't, if you lived up at the top of Barrie, you're not going to be, you don't care that we started measuring in Millardville. You care only that, how tall is the building next to my house? And in this case, it's 7 meters or whatever.
Yeah, 6.9 meters at that point.
Okay, so those don't, those aren't variances. You could build that. Apart from the fact that the way our bylaw describes it, the way our bylaw, it doesn't matter that the building is extra long. These people are only concerned about how high is it above the ground.
Other bylaws sometimes take averaging.
Exactly.
So there's a variety of ways to do it.
Buildings.
Or in fact have variances as it goes up a building slope, depending on the size of the building. So
the only point that exceeds 11 meters is right here.
And that's largely because the slope has fallen off.
That's correct.
You could build up the grade and have the same building height.
Yeah, it's one of the, I guess, I don't know what's the right word, ironic or perversion.
Probably both of those, yes.
But yes, if we were to artificially raise the grade,
you wouldn't need a variance, but the building could be even higher.
I'm not recommending this, and I don't want to do it because it'd be expensive. But if we were to raise the grade there, then the height was the absolute height geodetic would remain the same, but we would be in compliance with the bylaw. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, in a lot of commercial applications, we'll see that our manipulation of the grade, the building has more impact on the neighbors, but they don't need a variance permit because, in my, the first glance I had was that you were being very sensitive to the neighbors because I thought the building height above grade only got over, say, 11 meters as you went quite some distance from the neighboring properties, and that shows from the shadowing. So I'm not uncomfortable here. And since really the highest point of the building is actually the furthest point of the building from the neighbors as well, and it's the point of the building that the neighbors won't even be able to see from their homes because the lower points of the building are obstructing that view, I gather.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Councillor O'Neill again.
Yes. So just looking, now that was good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for those questions and your answers. So if this were a series of 5 buildings, not one big building, 5 buildings, let's say, separated by just a small walkway between each of the 5 buildings, basically taking up the same height, those buildings in the northwest corner, there would be no variance needed. There would only be one variance needed, most likely, for that one point of the library, from what I understand you're saying.
That's exactly
okay,
correct,
good.
yes.
And the other one, I have a question for the gentleman from the school board. And since the generator thing has come up, and I know it's not specifically, but let's deal with the generator thing, the issue. So the architect said that his understanding maybe the generator might be fired up once a month just to make sure it's running properly. Is that practice?
That's correct, yes.
Oh, okay.
We have a generator right now, quite an old one. This would be much newer, just north of the school board office, and we do the same thing there. Once a month we maintain it, and it has to be fired up. We actually inform all the, because it's so loud, we inform the school board staff. But once it's done, I've been there 2 years, and I'm not, except for the maintenance, it's never fired up.
Do you have any information? Do any of the other high schools in School District 43 have emergency generators attached to them?
I would think so. Maybe high schools, I would think so.
Yes.
I can't recall.
So you don't have any statistics on how often they're fired up on an emergency basis?
No. Well, the James Park that I'm working on, There is a heat pump, but that's not for emergencies. It comes on only if the temperature drops to zero. And that also, in fact, that's being programmed. So if it does come on to generate more heat, it comes on when the ambient sound or noise in the neighborhood is at its peak. So it's not at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. It's actually even after 7 o'clock when the school.
And are you also aware that there exists companies, and actually a world-leading company in Aldergrove, that builds muffling units to house generators?
I wasn't aware, perhaps.
Yeah, it's one of my neighbors has got a very successful business.
Well, in fact, for James Park in Port Coquitlam, we looked at everything from jackets for the compressors, adding some acoustical in the interior of the structure itself, and we found that programming that unit was actually more efficient.
Programming at certain times.
Yeah, so you can program. I don't think you can program the generator, the emergency generator, but certainly that area, as Ron said, it's built into the hill. And it's not visible. Well, it is visible from the south side, but it is practice to maintain it once a month. It would only prove valuable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now here at City Hall we have a generator. It is maintained about monthly. It comes on about 5 o'clock in the evening. I don't know where it is because I've never heard it, but I know it's on, but we don't hear it. They are a much quieter instrument these days, but of course it's not a subject of today's variance. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers? Please come forward.
Well, my house is...
Your name and address for the record, please.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Name is Jitendra Hundal, and address is 1565 King Albert Avenue.
Okay.
So that... hello?
Yep.
Okay.
You're good.
So my place is right here, actually.
Okay.
And basically you walk 10, maybe 20 feet, and you have these stairs that go right to the library. I don't think that's appropriate for me personally, selfishly. Like, I don't really want that in my neighborhood. Also, another concern I have is, I have a list here, actually. Okay, so it appears that the real need for any of these variances is for aesthetic purposes. And, like, this structure can be built and accommodate these students without having these aesthetic, what they want these variances for. Also, the reason why the elevation is so high over here compared to where we live is because there's a soccer field right here right now. Now that soccer field is roughly about 3 to 4 meters above our finished grade. The reason why they did that is understandable because you can't play soccer on a tilted field, right? And now what I'm asking is, they're not gonna no longer have the soccer field, so why do you still have to abide by that old elevation, that grade? Like, why isn't the grade going to be changed to what the road in front is, what my elevation is, what I had to abide by when I built my house? Another thing is, when they put this building up here, this is going to be a very main entrance and exit to the school. I could see a lot of students just getting picked up and dropped off right here, and this is already going on quite a bit where the school is over here. It's only going to increase when it comes over here. Now, my neighbor Tyrone, he lives right on the corner of Barrie and King Albert, and he's told me that he has to pick up garbage from students all the time off his property, and this is just going to magnify and increase when this structure is built right here, like that.
Sir, I hate to do this to you, but there are certain rules that council asks me to enforce. We don't normally try to state them at the beginning of a variance. You have to stick to the issue at hand. The issue isn't whether there's going to be a high school next to you or where the sidewalk's going to be. It's only about the height of the building, because we're only doing a development variance permit on the height. And so I'm sort of stuck here. I'm not allowed to let you actually
okay, no problem. No, I figured you guys were talking about the noise, about the garbage,
you're not supposed to
the
be,
generators and all that, so I figured this would be acceptable also.
Issues do come up, but
Yeah.
I hope you'll...
Is that one and the same, or like you guys talk about the garbage cans?
The only thing we can vote on today is whether they're allowed to go higher than the bylaw permits, based on how we calculate from the lowest point of the building.
Right.
So it's that question that's before us today.
Right.
If we couldn't even say at this point, please don't put your sidewalk that way. I mean,
I understand.
Today it's about the height.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So as far as that goes, again, my house is about 4 meters below what the grade that they want to build on, and they want to put a structure that's 16 meters above that. So we're looking at 20 meters, around 60 feet. And again, again, Kieran's brought up this point also before, but is aesthetically, like, yeah, sure, they're saying the trees. How long is it going to take for these trees to mature to full height? What is the height of these trees when they're going to be planted? These are all questions I would like answers to.
2 feet.
And
okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask for clarification, and I don't know if staff have it. Do we have geodata at the southwest corner of the property, at this gentleman's front yard, for example? Do we know the height, the elevation difference, from his front yard to, say, that low point that the architect referred to, or the high point of the building, or any of the points on the building?
Yeah.
I don't see it on the map here, on the figures we have.
Your Worship, I wouldn't have that information in hand. Like with the review of the site plan and that, we would take the the lot corners in existing property line grades to be sort of a given, and then the school design would have to work within that. Now, if Mr. Hoffert's cross-section, I don't know if it came down and showed that size. I think he had one cross-section that went towards the southwest corner of the site. That might give us some sense of what the grade differences are between the soccer field and the gentleman's property to the west.
Mr. Hoffert, your cross-section A, I think it was, that goes perpendicular to the length of the building. Here he comes. It's shown here A in the wrong direction, but it's the same line, I think.
We did this cross section here, this long one.
Well, this is, or you would. Okay,
this would be the house on the corner there, or very near your house, that one. And currently, the height at the very corner of the site is over 4 meters high. There.
Sorry, I want to clarify.
Right here at this corner, it is 4 meters high, higher than the road.
But that's cross-section A, isn't it? I'm looking at the line A through the library.
Okay.
Is that the right one?
Here we are.
I think it's the profile A that you're close to it anyway.
This one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. That's this one here. Yeah. Okay.
So the first 4 meters is what Mr. Roberts described as that slope up to the field, I guess, the field level, which is the flat part. Is that roughly what we're talking about?
We are intending to regrade that down to King Albert here.
And that's where.
So this would be sloping down. Would continue on.
So the grade that's shown on profile A isn't necessarily the finished grade. That's right.
It'd be approximately the finished grade. Yes. Yeah. You know, instead of it sort of coming at a point, a drop off, we're going to taper it back.
So it's true that the building roof at that point is 20 meters or so above his front yard, but it's 150 meters away, or close to it.
Yeah, I think he's accurate in saying that this point here, well, it's this point that's the high point. This one is about 12 meters plus 4. Okay. It'd be 4 plus 16, 20 meters. Yeah, he's quite right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The distance is.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. You could leave that map. If you could leave that one up. Do you have any more comments?
Thanks. Just a quick question. How is the library an asset to the residents who aren't students in the area? Just wanted a clarification on that. And
again, we don't get to tell the school board not to build libraries.
No, because that was the gentleman's one of his main points, that this library is going to be a great asset to this neighborhood, and I was just trying to understand how is that.
Okay, no, it's a fair comment. I don't think it provides a direct. The education of the children obviously is an asset, but not.
Yeah,
not
yeah. But how about for like Kieran or Maggie here, who've been living here for 40 years? Their kids are all grown up and moved away. So, yeah, that's all I got. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Okay. Are there any other speakers to this item? Please come forward.
Hi there. Good evening, Mayor, Your Worships. My name's Tyrone Tyru. I live towards the end of Berry Street, close to Jatinda. I wanted to point out, first of all, I believe the variance permit was sent to all residents within a 50-metre distance from the property, which accounts essentially for 100% of the people that have actually objected to this variance permit. I'm not too sure whether that point was made clear there. Also, we've got some nice drawings here that the architect showed, where he's actually got the single-family house here, a nice tree, an angle that shows the top of the roof. Would like to point out that there aren't trees when one of us residents looks outside our property. There aren't trees all the way towards the existing school. So from here we do actually see some sky. So now, obviously, if a building is going to be built here, that essentially means that we will have less of a view if it is higher. So I understand that we won't see the highest point, but I know it's something to we're only speaking about the variance, but our view is something that we do actually cherish. But I essentially wanted to make the point of the fact that 100% of the people that received the notices have actually objected to this.
Okay. Councillor Robinson. Oh, no, you pulled it. No, she perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this portion of the meeting related to the development variance permit closed. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The staff recommendation is that Council approve the development variance permit for 570 Poirier Street, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute this permit on behalf of the City of Coquitlam.
So moved by Councillor O'Neill. Seconded by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Segura.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm wondering if there's any way that they could have built a school to where they didn't have to have a variance for height variance. Mr. McIntyre, seem to have quite a bit of property there, and I'm wondering why the building is such that they have to have a variance permit.
Your Worship, think as... Is that off?
Talk a little further away.
I think as Mr. Hoffert described, the method of calculating the heights and given the sloping condition of the site kind of amplifies the height requested, the variance requested. If the question is, could the design be altered to meet the bylaw, it would certainly be possible. I think it would come back with a different design solution. It would probably be not as aesthetic or perhaps as enlightening inside, if you will. You know, the architect has come back with a design for his client, the school district, and part of that design includes a portion of the building exceeding the maximum height. If they couldn't exceed that and the design had to be modified, it could be done, but I would suspect they would be losing time here. It would cost more money. They'd have to go back and revise their design significantly. They would not be in a position to tender the project anytime soon. Physically, I guess it's possible. I think procedurally it would be very difficult for them.
And tell me, are the engineering department, yourself and the planning department, are you concerned about garbage bins being placed to where it's so close to the neighborhood? Commercial, that's commercial.
Yeah. It's not part of the variance request, of course, Your Worship. This location, it's a little tricky in locating garbage receptacle areas, and it's not right on the property line. There is some setback distance. I would trust there would be some fencing and screening around that part of the facility to minimize the impact. I don't think it's going to be overly problematic in that location.
Okay, and normally generators are inside buildings instead of outside the buildings, or built into with a cement wall around them or whatever?
Your Worship, I'm no expert in generator locations, but a variety of solutions. Sometimes you'll find them in the basement of a building, which I believe is the situation here at City Hall. That does create some venting issues. With other installations, it's where on the site it's convenient and makes sense. And I think as long as there's attention given to properly structuring it such that you can have some buffering of the noise, and that would take care of most of those issues. Plus, I think, as was noted, really the technology in these generator sets has quite evolved now, where the engines actually make less noise. There's better muffling functions.
I'm concerned when the architect said that it would be 65 to 70 decibel points, the generator. Well, it's above our bylaw, because our bylaw calls, I believe, for 55.
No, it doesn't.
It's, well, it can't be any more than 65 then.
No.
It's either 55 or 65 is max.
Your Worship, if I could, I believe what Mr. Hoffert was referring to is it's the ambient. That is the sort of existing background noise, and he said I think he indicated 65 decibels at the property line. So they are designing their the generator installation so it wouldn't exceed that. It wouldn't exceed what exists there now in terms of an ambient background noise.
So if the noise is above the decimal points that's allowed by the city, it'd be okay to be close to it or even with that.
Ms. McIntyre, on the question of the noise.
Actually, our bylaw, I believe it pegs it at a noise that disturbs, so it becomes a little more subjective. But no, in this case here, they've taken a reading, and according to that analysis, they're showing a background noise of 65 decibels.
Yes.
So that's out there right now. And so what they would be proposing for this emergency generator installation would be designed such that it wouldn't exceed that 65 decibels. So it would fit in with the background noise.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. On the variance permit related to the height, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I really appreciate these neighbors coming out and letting us know their concerns, and I'm quite pleased to see the what do you call this? I'm losing my words.
Section?
The petition. Thank you. Okay. Good God, it's a long day.
It has been a long day.
It has been a long day.
For the last 10
I'm losing
hours.
my words, so bear with me. And I'm interested in the second paragraph of the petition that speaks to what the concerns are, and that's opposed to the increased building height from 11 meters to 16 meters because it will increase the appearance of the building bulk from our properties, the street and the surrounding properties. So that's one. It will reduce light access and privacy and restrict views from our properties. That's two. And it will reduce both our property value both now and in the future. So it's with that in mind that I was really paying attention and listening to what the architects were saying and our general manager was speaking to. And I appreciated getting the lesson in how we actually measure, because that's math and it's not my thing, and it was really helpful to hear how we do it. And so I was using that lesson to understand the impact it would have on the appearance of the building bulk from our properties. Would it reduce, so that's what I was paying attention to. Would it increase the appearance of building bulk from our properties? Would it reduce the light access, privacy, and restrict views from all of our properties? And will it reduce property value both now and in the future? And I haven't, at this point, I haven't been convinced that the concerns would actually play out the way the neighbors have described it. So I'm likely to support it unless I hear from my colleagues who would have some other perspective that would somehow indicate that any of these things would happen. I live near a very large church, and as a result, some people, can't see mountains that at some point they probably could, and it's a different property, and just the way this is laid out, yes, there is a variance, but I can't see how I haven't been able to make the connection yet, how it impacts on the building bulk, reducing light, privacy, restricting views, and property value. So I'm prepared to support this going forward unless I hear from my colleagues who have a different perspective on how it would result in those changes. So I'm prepared to support it going forward.
Thank you very much. I, too, am prepared to support this. And it was one of the questions that was just asked Mr. McIntyre. Could they build this building without requiring a variance? And one of the options would be to lower the roof line, and the other one would be to raise the grade at the bottom. You could take the bottom floor of the library and build it a little bit underground, and so the grade would be up here, and then the building would all conform. It would be exactly the same height as it is now, but it would conform to the bylaw, and we wouldn't be required to have any variances. It wouldn't be as useful of a building, and the library would be kind of tucked in underground, but it certainly would meet the bylaw. And that's because of the way the bylaw measures grade. So this is a variance about the bad way we measure grade, and I'm going to actually, when we're through with this, I'm going to ask staff to come back with ways of dealing with grade on buildings. We had a building up on Westwood Plateau. It's actually, I believe, a 12 or 13-story building. No part of it is more than about 4 or 5, 6 stories above ground, because it's built onto the slope. But the way we measure grade is how low is the lowest part of the building and how high is the highest part of the building, and therefore it's the highest. It's a tower. It's a high-rise tower, even though no part of it is more than just 40 feet above ground. So stories. We need to fix the way we measure grade so that that level of concern doesn't arise simply from the way we measure grade. So the concerns I had, same concerns that Councillor Robbins had, were: does the bulk of the building, is it out of character with the neighborhood, and is it overshadowing? And so I want to express my appreciation to the school board and the architect, because I believe they've gone to great lengths to make sure the building doesn't overshadow the neighbors, despite the slope of the site, which is a challenging grade, but also despite the enormous pipe that goes up the middle of the property. By tucking the building right up against the pipeline, they've minimized the effect of overshadow, if there was any effect. So What we could end up with, if we were to reject the development variance permit, we could have them go back to the drawing board and build the building right at the bottom corner up against King Albert, and it could be 4 stories tall, 40 feet. We'd have, and it would go right to the property line. It could, I think they've gone to great lengths to avoid any of that kind of impact. The reality is that they're here applying for a development variance permit for the height, not because the building is too tall, but because we measure it badly. The building at no point is the building taller than the bylaw above the adjacent dirt. It's always within that height. But the way we measure it and the way it looks like we measure it on the sections makes it so that you need a variance permit for portions of the building that you can't even see from the street or from the neighbor's property. So I respect completely. I thank very much the neighbors that have gone to this length and have come before us to express their concerns. I want, given that they were raised, I do want to make sure we've answered questions related to the garbage enclosure, which isn't on tonight's agenda. But I also want to reflect that I think the school board has done a pretty credible job of trying to manage that bulk and keep it away from the neighbors. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think you've done a very good job explaining the situation. We're dealing with the school, and this has been quite an education because Councillor Hodge and I have been on council for about 1.5 years now. I think this is the first time we've encountered the issue of variances regarding height and as it pertains to the grade levels and how complicated it can get. And I can understand, and I do, and so that's our education. I think there's some education for the neighbors involved as well. They certainly, I can understand how when they get a notice that there's a request for a variance, and it seems fairly substantial, from 11 meters to 16 meters, 5-meter variance, 16 feet, that seems substantial. And I can understand, and I certainly appreciate the fact they've gone to all the trouble, the effort, and the commitment to engage the city to come here tonight to present us the petition. But I hope that they've understood tonight as well some of the things that I think I've learned, that we've heard tonight, that there will be no light access problem. I haven't heard anything about privacy. The restricted views, it's hard to understand how that's a huge concern given the fact that I think the trees will restrict view much more than the building. I'd ask the clerk to put up Appendix C, and we're talking about the bulk of the building. And to me, this once this gets up, this is what the building actually looks like. If you're following at home and you don't have all the documents in front of you, Appendix C shows extremely low-looking building. And it reminds me of a couple of things. One, Arthur Erickson's famous courthouse building downtown, where he decided not to put a typical high-rise up in the middle of downtown to go vertical, but he had the land to go horizontal. And he laid on its side a high-rise building. And in doing so, created a vibrant new heart to the city. Architectural masterpiece, some people say. This also reminds me of a building that literally almost hugs the ground, the University of Lethbridge building, and maybe you can actually just quickly put this up underneath there as well, that picture there. It's very sensitive to the surrounding, and I can imagine at the bottom, so look in the middle of the bottom of that building, you know, it's probably pretty high from maybe 3 or 4 stories up, but from a whole bunch of other vantage points, it really hugs the ground. And you look back to Appendix C again, if you don't mind. Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Gilbert, could you just stand there?
That's right. How we hug the ground here too, on the left and the right, and it gets a little tall in the middle. I think it's a beautiful building. I think the school board has done a wonderful job designing this, and I really don't think that it's going to. I think it's going to be a real asset to the neighborhood. I think the neighbors are going to be very proud to have this in their community, and as Councillor Robinson says, unless I hear some other information from some of my colleagues, I'll be supporting the variance. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Well, I have to say, when I first read the report and I saw the numbers, I thought, oh my goodness, because I knew it was going to be built down by that that corner and the lower part of the site. But having heard the explanation, and it really comes down to what's the starting point? Where do we take the starting measurement? So to me, it's not really about how high the building is, but how low do we start to measure it from? And I suppose if part of the things that's working against this building, it's a very long building. And if this building were to continue right down to King Albert Street, I suspect the variance would probably be, instead of 11 meters, might be 20 meters or 25 meters, when in fact the highest point of the building hasn't changed, but the point which we start taking the measurement gets that much lower. And if I understand it correctly, have this same building been 4 buildings all in a row, individually not one of the buildings would require a variance, but it's when we attach this into one long building, we creep down to the point that we get a low point. Am I sort of reading this correctly, that you could have that middle building by itself at the highest point and it wouldn't require a variance, but as we build further away from that center point, we get lower? But if we didn't attach it and we're separate buildings, neither one of them would require a variance. Is that?
Your Worship, through the chair, no, I think in this situation, it just happens to be this is sort of the center module in this long running complex, and it's on the east side of that actually has that sort of swooping roof that goes above. Right. That's the highest point. And in that module, if you will, it's the one that extends most further to the west too. So as Mr. Hofford explained, because the slope is going like this, the building extends further west, it amplifies that height differential. So if that would have to be one single building if things are broken into components. Okay. So you'd still have that condition of low on one side and high on the other.
So it's all within that same center. It's not the fact that it's much lower down near King Albert. It's the fact that it is in that one spot. But then it must be because there's a bit of a dip or in the topography that's existing there. Is that why this is occurring?
It's to I guess take advantage of that lower level in the building, as he was explaining. Like the building foundation follows the grade down, and right. So there's additional usable space down there.
So it's stepping down with the grade, but the problem is the highest point is built on higher land, and the lowest point. But we don't measure as we go. We measure where we finish, and at the highest point, even though they're not right over top of each other. So that's what's happening. I'd just like to see one diagram again, if we could. And it was the one with the views from the house and the trees. And I'm just wondering if I could have one last look at that, because that's. At the end of the day, this is really what it's about. Is that one I think looks good. Trey, I think that was the one I was looking at. Okay, is that one A? Yeah. Okay, A is good. And if we could slide it down a little bit, where does it pass over the highest point? Is it so it clears? So you never actually see, because the corner of the building, which it does conform, isn't the height. So what you're really seeing isn't where the variance is being applied anyway. Okay, so I see that's helpful, because again, and even the same one, we're seeing the same thing, that your sight line, the corner of the building is what you're catching, and even though the building may be at a higher point, and again, it's just because of how the building's situated. Okay, no, that's good. Okay, thank you. That's great.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking at Appendix A because it has nice, clear print that I can read. And I guess the first thing I would say, there's been a couple of comments that have said if it weren't for the way we measure it, nothing would be offside. But I look at the lowest point of finished ground elevation, the point that we measure from. There's a little red dot, and right beside it there's another little red dot that says height to adjacent grade, 12.89 meters. 12.89 meters is the apparent height of the building, and it's the height of the building the way we measure it. and it is offside our standard. So that would require a variance in that one corner.
If they'd have built up grade at that point, then.
If they built up the grade, or if they dug the building deeper into the ground, or, you know, if we had some ham, we could have ham and eggs if we had some eggs. But to move to my next question, looking at the same drawing, in the southernmost corner, we have a little block of 3 rectangles marked A, C, and B, and a little circle marked B. And I'm assuming that those letters have the same reference to building low point as we see in the table on the left. So I have the A section tells me the height to adjacent grade is 5.6 in the top corner. And the little circle mark B has height to adjacent grade of 11.06, which is just over, I think. But the section marked C, which is the 3rd highest roof level, I think, doesn't have an indication of what its height to adjacent grade is. Yeah, and I'm not sure where it fits in relation to the sections that Councillor Hodge asked for just a moment ago. So can anybody tell me what that section of roof is? I'm not even sure what the part of the building that is, frankly.
It wouldn't have a relationship to adjacent grade because it's in the middle of the building, but Mr. McIntyre smiles because not because he knows the answer. I can tell that.
I've got neither ham nor eggs. I can check with Mr. Hofford. He'll know the details. I'm sorry, I'm not the file manager on this side. I'd have to go back and check with him. I can do that and get that technical information and respond to the question if you want.
I'm sorry that I didn't ask the question while we were in a position to ask questions of people other than Mr. McIntyre.
The rules associated with public hearings and receiving more information don't apply to development variance permits. Mr. Clerk.
They do not in particular, but in fact I would say this to be a question of clarification because the architect at the time did speak to that part of the complex, identifying as the arts wing, I believe. And
Crawford, be willing to take the microphone. Or not take it. Just borrow it for a moment.
And if he's able to identify a section that actually addresses that part of the building, that would be very helpful.
C is here.
Yep.
And here.
Well, you know, perhaps I'm more of an architect than I thought I was because I managed to make you understand what I was talking about.
And those portions are here. They're in the middle of the building, and those are the pop-ups with the cutter story windows on both sides. So that represents that section right there. So that's a lot of light. Oh, I'm sorry. So that portion of the building in the middle is where the clerestory windows pop up.
That's over the central.
It's over the atrium, yes. And
I see. So it's
that occurs along there.
I'm not looking at a plan view particularly. I'm not looking at what in grade 7 industrial arts they taught us was a plan view. It's something a little different.
Yeah. Well, it's these two portions.
Yeah.
Marked C. Yes.
And they look central to the building because they're that corridor that goes the full length of the building. Yeah, on the sides.
Okay. You know, I appreciate the challenge presented by our way of measuring this. But it's the standard that we set. And to support it because it's difficult for the proponent, it seems to me, you know, we could have gone deeper into the ground. There's a variety of solutions, and not the one that some of us might characterize as a cheat of raising the ground along the side of the building, but you know, that's I came to council so I could avoid thinking like a tax person, finding the way around the rule. So I will I will have some difficulty supporting this, but I'm going to wait and hear whether anyone is as challenged as I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, after listening to how we do our measurements, it's bizarre. I don't know who thought of that one, but it is bizarre, you have to admit. So we do have to look at this so we don't have to go through this again. I think the building is going to be a much more attractive building and architecturally more low-slung than what's there now. The fact that it has different roof heights and that, I think, also breaks it up. I like the fact that the highest point is almost in the middle. If you look, I'm trying to sort of superimpose this map over the one that I see of the existing Centennial School, and the highest point is on the northeast, almost in the middle, almost where the corner of a roof is now, close to the oil line, so perhaps just a little further down. But I think the building has sufficiently different roof lines that it's actually going to break itself up. And the fact that the tallest point is nowhere near Barrie or King Albert, but away and glass, and the fact that I think I heard the closest part to the school that you would see from the corner of King Albert and Barrie was something like 157 feet, was it, Mr. McIntyre? Something like that. So that's a fair distance away, and it's still low. It's still low, and probably not much different than that's there now. So I have a little angst about it, but the fact that the school building is broken up and not one great big square block again, to me makes it a little more interesting on site and probably acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I'm glad from Mayor Stewart and so on feel about how the elevations, the slope of the property, and when you look at the grades now, and I look at the questions from the when you talk about the residents all opposed, but I think if the residents in there better understood what we're talking about today and how it was measured, and talking about the building at this closest point to the residents on Barrie Street is 6.9 meters. So the building at the closest point is quite a bit underneath what the total height requirements could be at 11 meters. The only place where we need a variance above the 11 meters is one of the furthest points away from all the properties on Barrie Street. And it's only a slight amount. So I think the distance even reduces that when you look at that view again. So I'm glad we've had this discussion, and I look at the other than this one, you've got 8 meters, you have on the front side 6, 5. So I mean, it drops down significantly. The top part is glass, I think, as Councillor Reid pointed, so there's a see-through ability on that top part. And so I'm less concerned about the massing of the building when I read it, and better understanding today. And I think that cross-section, as Councillor O'Neill pointed out, shows how much it really sort of hugs the ground and is lowered down. I think the architect, if I'm correct, said that, you know, the building massing that's there right now is about the same type of blockage that you would get that this building is sitting right here right now. So it's similar. So my biggest concern was when you look at the point closest to any of the properties along Barrie Street is 6.9 meters, far below, and the one point that it does exceed it is quite a distance from anyone else and anyone's houses along there. So I don't think it's going to be a view problem or a blockage problem, no different than what's existing there now at this time. Thank you.
Okay. I see no other speakers. The question is a development variance permit. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. And thank you very much to the residents. We hope some of the questions have been answered. We're not sure that we're satisfied, but we have lots of things that challenge us. Thank you. We'll come back for 13. Before Mr. Clerk introduces the next item, we're going to adjust the schedule, please, and it'll become evident. We'll deal with 12, 14, 13 in that order, and I'll ask for Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. Since this is a perceived potential conflict of interest, as it is right beside my property, the first one, I'll be stepping out on these next two items. Thank you.
Councillor Asmundson excuses himself on 12 and 14. We'll do them in that order, and we'll come back for 13. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 12 is consideration of fourth and final reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 4329. This is a proposed lane cancellation adjacent to 3475 Darwin Avenue and 3466 and 3468 Roxton Avenue. This is bylaw number 4330. The three-part recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to save Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4329 for 3475 Darwin Avenue, 3466 and 3468 Roxton Avenue. Give first, second, and third readings to save Coquitlam Highway dedication cancellation bylaw number 4330. This, again, is for 3475 Darwin, 3466 and 3468 Roxton. And finally, 3, direct the bylaw number 4330 be advertised in accordance with their community charter.
So moved. Second. Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
As Your Worship just indicated, we will move on to item 14 at this time. Item 14 is fourth and final reading of highway dedication cancellation bylaw number 4381. This is adjacent to 3463, 3469, 3473, and 3475 Wilkie Avenue. The recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading of highway dedication cancellation bylaw number 4381.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll go to item 13 when Councillor Asmundson returns. We canceled the lane and we moved it through your property.
You have a generator in your yard.
Okay, I'll regain control of the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
When you leave the room. Item 13. Item 13 is the Austin Heights Business Improvement Area Bylaw. This is Bylaw 4394. The two-part recommendation is that Council receive the certificate of sufficiency for the Austin Heights Business Improvement Area as certified by the City Clerk, and 2, give first 3 readings to Austin Heights Business Improvement Area Bylaw number 4394.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Sikora. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, I noticed that there's 7 property owners that did not agree with the tax, collection. And we collect the taxes. Now, what happens with these 7? Are they have to pay, even although they are not agreeing with it? You know what I'd like to know is really why they did not agree. You know, it'd be interesting to know why that they did not join.
Do we have any indication as to whether they disagreed or failed to return the form? Or
in order to disagree, it was necessary to return the form.
Okay, that's
and there are 3 that did so. I can't speak to what the individual ones that returned the form. I don't know. The form doesn't provide that opportunity. In the course of the public consultation period, I did receive 2 phone calls, and I don't know if it was these property owners, but what they did feel was that for commercial was a little bit different than office. They felt that the business improvement area provided benefits to commercial property owners, retailers, specifically that don't necessarily accrue to office owners because they have set tenancies and material objects, not material, but their business model doesn't quite, they don't see the benefit as great as the retailers would. But I can't say that if the 2 are related here. I don't have that information.
Catchment area, so you know that doesn't make sense.
I think what they felt is that if you had a dentist's office, someone would go to that they go to that dentist because that's where the dentist is, not because the ambience of the neighborhood changed their choice of dentist necessarily. But that's just what was communicated to me. I can't say that that's true of all office property owners in the area.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Okay. The motion is a BIA. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Over to 15. I'm going to ask, there was a discussion about the possibility of receiving information from the clerk about what constitutes leave, and we may want to have the clerk take a moment here to explain what constitutes leave.
Absolutely, Your Worship.
Actually, read the item first, I guess.
Sure. Item 15 is a request for leave without pay. This pertains to Councillor Robinson. The staff recommendations that Council grant Councillor Robinson's request for leave without pay for the period of April 16th to May 15th, and that staff be directed to undertake the administrative activities necessary to process this request. I received a question of clarification about what such a leave involved, and perhaps the summary I'll start with, and I'd be happy to respond to further questions. The view of staff is that this is a leave from formal duties. That would mean attendance at council meetings, standing committee meetings, advisory committee meetings, that the person would not be used in the rotation of acting mayor as we move through the roster of acting mayors. There would be an expectation of non-attendance in these formal capacities. What staff would do is we would continue to include a councillor on leave in informal capacities, and primarily the best example of this would be communication loops, that we would not remove them from council circular emails. While we may not send them materials directly, those materials would be deposited in their mailbox for their view upon their return. I think there's two parts there. One, to remove them from all the communication activities would be more disruptive than the game, but also I believe that councillors on leave would like to remain in the loop so as to remain current to activities and knowledgeable so that their return to service is as seamless as possible. Assuming. We have an end date attached to the leave, so the assumption.
On the question of what constitutes leave only, Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, so would a councillor, if the councillor were to hear that some really, really important subject was coming up, would that councillor have the right, the obligation, or to come and vote on that?
I guess I would say they would have the right. The legislation would not prevent them as such. As noted in the staff report, the legislation does not require a formal leave of absence for the period of time being requested. In terms of the obligation, I would say the request for leave and its granting by this council would remove that obligation, that they have self-identified as being away for a period of leave, that they're not being paid for that period. There's not an expectation that they would remain current with the issue before them because they're not receiving formal council materials. Or if they are, they're not being expected to read them for that meeting. But in terms of a right, the legislation is not specific on that, in terms of my understanding of it.
Thank you.
Okay. As I understand it, the Act is somewhat silent on this subject, although it permits leaves as a way of excusing yourself from an extended absence, primarily for medical reasons. It doesn't establish the right of anyone to be restricted, or rather the restriction of someone from attending a council meeting if they've been duly elected and they haven't resigned or they haven't been forced out of office by some action related to the oath.
That is correct. Generally, the legislation takes the point of view that you're in office or you're not, and the gray area in between is simply one of serious extended leave, and as the legislation defines it as in the staff report, that would be over 60 days.
I'll explain for the people at home. This is two members of council who are both in the provincial election. They're running in the provincial election. Both of them have asked to be excused during the writ period. And it would be, I think, awkward for one of them to come back without letting, to me, I don't know that it would surprise me if one of them were to return for a vote. But, well, at least that answers my questions related to what constitutes a leave. Councillor Sikora, on what constitutes a leave?
Thank you very much. But certainly if Council Robinson or Council Reimer decides to come for a council meeting because they're free that night, you can't say, no, I'm sorry, you cannot participate. They can participate in it.
Yeah, they just said that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Roberts.
Given that this next item pertains to my request, I'm going to absent myself from the decision.
Yeah, I'll say, as I did with Councillor Reamer, there is no legal obligation upon her to leave because this isn't she doesn't gain anything. In fact, she loses if by this vote. But anyway, but consistency is important.
Move the recommendation.
The clerk values consistency.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Zagora, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. The recommendation, which is to grant leave. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? No one's opposed. That motion carries unanimously.
That was a hard decision.
Item 16 is the Metro Vancouver Board brief from their meeting of March 15th. The recommendation is that Council receive the brief for information, noting that our representatives to the Board are here to respond to any questions that may arise.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Asmundson. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, that is the last formal item on this agenda.
Councillor Reid.
I have something to do with staff that I'd like to bring up at this time.
Okay.
I want to give kudos to staff about this brochure. I'm sorry. I thought we did.
Yeah, you voted in favor, and you spoke quite eloquently, actually.
We enjoyed everything you had to say.
It was the best you've ever done.
I thought you were still asleep.
It was the shortest he's ever done.
Okay, seeing no other comments, motion to adjourn then. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. You're just being so mean. I think I can speak for all of council on this booklet. It is marvelous, and this is our flagship document for tourism publication, and it talks all about our tourism assets, culture, sports, recreation, filming, shopping, everything. And it's all due to David Monroe, our Economic Development Officer, who reports directly to our Deputy City Manager, Mr. Dumont, and also Dan McDonald. I don't know where you two find the time and the energy, and I know the heart and soul that's gone into this, but in all my 20-plus years in this council, this is the finest piece of work I've seen. And I'm so proud of you. So please convey my thanks to your departments.
We're speaking, of course, the inaugural edition, the first ever edition of the Coquitlam Visitor's Guide called Above All Coquitlam. It's absolutely a magnificent document, and hats off to the staff team that put that together. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did tell Dan McDonald this afternoon there's a great piece of work, and it is a great piece of work. There's no two ways about it. It's a great brochure. I think we need to more often, more of them as time goes by.
There you go. Outstanding. Seeing no other comments, a motion to adjourn will be in order. Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Nicholson to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. As is our